Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts football podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. From the latest science versus breakout stars and all news in between. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm Anthony.
And we are back from a one-day hiatus. And Anthony, your phone just went off.
It did a little bit.
How dare you?
I apologize.
How dare you? Get out. I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. I'm kidding. I'm not that mad. But we have a lot to talk about that happened over the past 48 hours. Of course, we're going to discuss the national championship game. We're going to discuss the national championship game between Alabama and Clemson, which has been dubbed as a quote-unquote instant classic. Mm-hmm. And a quarterback in that game has declared for the NFL draft. I think you kind of know who it is. It's Deshaun Watson, because you know Jalen Hurts, who played in that game, is a freshman. So Deshaun Watson declared for the NFL draft after the game. Mm-hmm. So we will talk about that, as well as the other quarterbacks and the draft class this year. And to end the show, we're going to discuss some AP Top 25. The final standings, the final rankings came out yesterday. And if anything breaks, we'll have it for you. But now, let's get started with the national championship game, shall we, Anthony? Well, Clemson upset the Alabama Crimson Tide 35-31. And this was a heck of a game, Anthony. I watched it from start to finish. Mm-hmm. This was a heck of a game, guys. Alabama, they looked like they were controlling the game through midway of the second quarter, and then Clemson came back to get the score within one game, 7-14. And then around the third quarter, Jalen Hurts threw to an uncover O.J. Howard, and we made the score 24-14. And right then and there, I was like, I think this is over. I don't know how they can come back from this. And first of all, in that play, there was 3 Tigers around O.J. Howard. Not one of them covered. Not one of them covered him. And then from there on, I was like, you know what, this game, I thought that game was over. But Deshaun Watson and the whole entire Clemson team, they put together a 21-point fourth quarter, and that was amazing in itself. Deshaun Watson led the team to 2 really good drives in a fourth quarter, one to take the lead, and then one to take the lead after Jalen Hurts had a really good, I think like 30 to 40 yard run, which was, I was just like, wow, amazed. But yeah, the game ended with a game-winning touchdown pass from Deshaun Watson to Hunter Renfrow with 1 second left. And this game kind of had a USC-Texas feel to it, but I don't think that this game was better than that. But I do think this game is in that category with one of the greatest championship games of all time. It is, especially in my time, because I literally enjoyed the fourth quarter alone. If you didn't tune into this fourth quarter, you missed out.
Yeah, no, this. So USC Texas is probably the greatest college football game I've ever seen in my life, and this one's close. I don't know if it's there because it's hard. Because
yeah, it is hard. That's why I don't.
A decade ago,
yeah, I don't want to put it there.
Stuff like that. It's close to that and everything else. Basically, we saw Deshaun Watson go with 2 game-winning drives, right? Because he took the lead. Then Jalen Hurts ran in again to take the lead again. And then with like 2:07, I think it was, left, had the game-winning drive. Made a not perfect pass, but, made the pass to Mike Williams, which Williams had to kind of like adjust and catch. Did the little, pick play, which technically illegal, but also worked, for the touchdown to win the game. It was one of those things where, like, you saw Mike Williams play, the wide receiver for Clemson, and he is good, man. Like, he is going to be, like, one of those, like, early first-round picks. Like, he is probably the best wide receiver that they, have right now in college football. And you could tell, like, because he wasn't there in the first half. And then once they brought him in the second half, it's like, oh, okay, cool. He's really valuable, and he means a lot to the team. And they just kept throwing him over and over because why not? And it was one of those games where the thing with Alabama was their defense, right? The defense is one of those things that everybody talked about because they have 3, 4, 5 guys that are going to make it in the first round. In that defense, apparently not.
I think about like four caliber first round picks in that defense alone.
Right.
Front 7, actually.
That's the thing with the front 7 because it's not so much of the defensive end, defensive backs, I should say. It's not necessarily them. It's more, like you said, the defensive linemen, linebacker, stuff like that, which is what they kind of churn out every single year. In this game, like Alabama, the funny thing is Scarborough, who got hurt, right? He broke his leg. He was doing obviously really well, 93 yards and 16 carries. And then once he went out, it was basically the thing of like, you talked about Jalen Hurts, who was a freshman, right? Like 18, 19 years old? Like you're going to throw all that on him. And Saban kind of knew like he doesn't have the kind of quarterback who, you can rely on, like a Deshaun Watson, someone who like you can say, okay, cool, run this offense, bail me out kind of thing like that. He's not that guy, so you had to basically hide your quarterback because you saw them, they were doing stuff. They were doing laterals and throwing passes like that with the wide receivers. Like they're trying to do a lot of things basically to get these yards, and it was working. Like I said, like had basically Mike Williams not made that catch, with about a minute left to go in the game, had he not made that catch, there's a solid enough chance that Clemson just kicks a field goal and they go into overtime, and then from there, who knows? And you came within a second of basically going into overtime of the national championship game while you're trying to hide your quarterback for the second half. And, this whole game, like it was, like I said, really good. The first half was just kind of meh. Like the first half was fine. The second half, from basically like the end of the third quarter on, was when it started to become really, really good. And you basically saw Deshaun Watson basically, maybe he's the first pick in the draft. Maybe
we will talk about that later on the show.
He's, someone who obviously impressed and had, semi Vince Young kind of a game. At the very least, he might have had a Jamarcus Russell game. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, he had a game where we all kind of saw how good he could be. But the game itself was really good, and which I didn't really expect. Like I expected it to be like a good enough game or whatever because it was a rematch. But the thing is, one thing with Alabama, or Nick Saban, I should say in general, is if you're a pocket quarterback, he's got you. Like he understands how to do that. But if you can run at all, Johnny Manziel, Steven Garcia, like if you can do any kind of running around in the pocket, it's not 100% that he's going to beat you. And Watson did that, and now they're national champions, and you can't take that away from him.
No, and I think the biggest takeaway from this game is Alabama, and you said it, Anthony. Alabama was a different offense when Bull Scarborough went out of the game. Like, they just couldn't run the ball effectively. The offense wasn't effective at all. Jalen Hurts struggled throughout the whole entire game outside of that 6 to 8 yard pass to O.J. Howard in that one 30-yard run. Outside of those two plays, that Clemson wins this game by like double digits. They probably wouldn't even have to have the game-winning drive. Outside those two big plays, offense for Alabama Crimson Tide couldn't do anything after Bo was hurt. But man, what about the receivers for Clemson? Let's talk about them. I don't think they're getting enough shine at all. Jordan Leggett, the tight end, incredible game, made credible plays. Mike Williams, of course, we touched on it. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick in the draft if he declares. I think he's a junior. If he's a senior, if he's a junior and he declares, I do think he's going to be a top 10 pick. What a game he has had. He made some type of NFL-type catches. Deion Kane also did well. And then you got Hunter Renfrow, who is a walk-on. Catching passes all over 4- and 5-star recruits at Alabama. So, as I say, incredible game from Clemson Tigers. And I don't know. I don't think we're going to see a national championship like this in probably another decade. Because if you remember, that USC and Texas game happened, I think, 2005? 06. This is 2017. So, right. I don't think we're going to expect this type of caliber game anytime soon. But, man, what a game that we had here in Tampa Bay. And I got to say, will Clemson be back? I don't know. Will Alabama be back? I think they will be.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Alabama basically has their reload style of basically we're going to get rid of 4 great defensive linemen, and then we're going to bring in 4 great defensive linemen to where Clemson, you lost your guy. You lost your quarterback, and you probably lost your wide receiver. So it's going to take a second to kind of get back to that level. To with Alabama, I mean, Scarborough. No one knew about Scarborough was a backup, right? Scarborough was a backup all year, and now we see him. We're like, oh, you're a giant person. Good God! Like, did you see the pictures that were circling around?
Did you see the tweet that Kirk Cousins had?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Kirk Cousins won the internet on Monday night.
Kirk Cousins in 10th grade looks like my cousin. I swear to God, he legit looks like my cousin.
Kirk Cousins, the Washington Redskins quarterback, tweeted a picture of it was actually a photo of Bo Scarborough in 10th grade, and then it was a picture of him in 10th grade. So this is what Cousins tweeted. Okay. On the left, that's Bo Scarborough in 10th grade. On the right, that's me in 10th grade. No wonder why Alabama never called me back. So I just gotta say, where does Alabama find these running backs at?
Well, here's the thing with Alabama. Saban has 5 national championships. He just goes to wherever supposedly the best running back in the country is, and he just looks at him and he's like, oh, you're about 6'2", 230 pounds. Hey, you want to play for us? No? Okay, cool. Or yeah? Okay, cool. That's all. He doesn't have to recruit the people, right? He just he's Nick Saban. Like I remember Browning, the guy, quarterback for Washington, right? Because he's local, because he used to play in Folsom, which is about 20, 30 minutes away from where we're at right now. He, in one of his practices, had Saban come out. Saban came out and kind of did the whole thing over there. And that's big, big, big things, right? If you have Saban, if you have Urban Meyer come out, if you have these guys come out, it's a very big deal. And for Scarborough, I mean, look at this dude. Look at him. All those muscles. That dude doesn't look like he's in 10th grade. That looks like he's 3 years into the pros. He's 3 years into the NFL. Kirk Cousins looks like somebody who just basically decided he wanted to play football and looks like 160 pounds. Not the same thing. Not the same at all. And like you said, whether max preps or whatever, you can find out where the best running backs or linebackers or whatever in the nation are, and you can go there. And for Saban, either Saban goes there or he takes his best kind of recruiting, assistant or whatever, and just says all right, go there and basically, offer him a scholarship. And he was the backup, so you imagine what they have coming around next year, or what even their third string running back is. I mean, all the people they've had, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram. Even someone like Kenyon Drake, who was a backup, is doing well in Miami.
He was the Miami Dolphins backup. I actually thought he was going to emerge as a starter, but Jay Ajayi ended up taking over that role. But Alabama, they just always find ways to get a good running back, and they just pump him out all the way to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Ones that are still in the NFL right now is Mark Ingram. Trent Richardson didn't work out in the NFL. The jury's still on Derrick Henry. T.J. Yeldon. I think he's heading to his 3rd year, so I think his career somewhat is kind of trending towards, he may not be working out there. Keon Drake is a compliment running back, so maybe that's what he's best suited for. But, these running backs at Alabama, I just don't know where they find them. I don't know where they feed them. I don't know where they breed them at.
I don't know, man.
They find somewhere. But before we go to our first break, I just want to say Deshaun Watson's final stat line in his final college football game. He goes 36 for 56, 420 passing yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. He also had one through the ground, so 4 total touchdowns, and he added 43 yards on the ground on 21 attempts. Jalen Hurts, the freshman quarterback at Alabama, went 13 for 31, 131 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and on the ground, Hurts had 63 yards on 10 carries, and of course that 30-yard touchdown. So, tell you what, 2 quarterbacks. And, we will be talking about one of them when we come back. And, Deshaun Watson did declare for the NFL draft. So when we come back to the Golden Stimmy Contest Football Podcast, we will be talking about Deshaun Watson and the other quarterbacks in this draft class when we come back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Well, we got some breaking news here at the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. Well, it looks like Denver have found their next head coach, or expected to offer the job, that is, to Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. So he looks like he's about to become the Denver Broncos' next head coach. The Broncos are expected to offer him the job today, or just a matter of the next 24 hours. But the Denver Broncos coaching vacancy, probably the most attractive, this year. And then, comes like days after Doug Marrone had, becoming the head coach there at Jacksonville, which I think is a great hire, by the way. It looks like the Buffalo Bills will happen to offer the head coaching position to Sean McDermott, that is. And then so it looks like, there's still, the top two head coaching candidates, Kyle Shanahan and Josh McDaniels, are still out there in the market. But, Vance Joseph, he is a defensive guy. His defense did struggle against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wildcard game. But I do think with that defense and that talent, I do think that any coach that will step into that role was going to do a good job.
Yeah, and talk about with like Vance Joseph, he is somebody who, the Dolphins weren't great this year, but he has a body of work before that. He was, a defensive backs coach with Cincinnati before that for a couple of years, and he was with Texans, the Houston Texans from 2011 to 2013. So he's had, good defensive teams that he's not been the leader of, but been involved in. And then this year, his defense wasn't great at Miami, but he was fine. And, it looked like he's going to get the job in Denver. And Denver, already has a pretty good defense. Not like he has to really tweak with anything. You got Von Miller, you got to keep Talib, you got people over there that know what they're doing. And he's going to step into there. And I think it's actually a pretty good hire because he's been somebody who you got to think over with this Miami Dolphins defense. I guess I know it a little bit better because I'm a fan of the team. But you have Ndamukong Suh. And everything, fine. He's one of the better defensive tackles in the game. You don't have to really worry about him. But you get someone like, call it Cameron Wake, who came back from an Achilles injury, and you had to kind of ease him back into it because you didn't want to basically just play him a lot from the jump. And he still got 10.5 sacks. Coming off of that, you had a defensive back situation where you had Byron Maxwell, who was bad in the first part of the year, and then slowly got a little bit better as it went along. Putting him in different packages, putting him in different schemes to help out, basically help him out to basically thrive where he can thrive, right? Because he obviously did really well in Seattle, so he's talented, but you want to put him in situations where it's better for him. So you could see the defense get a little bit better as the year went on, which I think you absolutely credit then to Vance Joseph. So you take something like that and you take a guy who is not just going to be stubborn, is no, I have my system, I run my system, you figure out my system. No. The whole thing with the Dolphins, whether it was a head coach, Adam Gase, or Vance Joseph, or whoever, was one of those things of, okay, cool, so this is how I'm going to go into the season. And then once the season kind of progressed, it was okay, maybe this isn't working. Let's try this to help the players out, and then it would work. So now you're going to have him go over into Denver and basically say, okay, cool, so I have a way that I want to do this, but let's also see if we can do other things to where it's beneficial for them, beneficial for how I want to run it, kind of go both ways and help both people out. And then on offense, his biggest thing now is trying to find a quarterback, right? Because we don't think Trevor Siemian's a guy. Paxton Lynch is a rookie, so maybe he's a guy, maybe he's not. But for how good that defense is, you want to get another Super Bowl in there, so you want to find a quarterback that can lead you to that. You want to find a veteran quarterback who's there. I guess best case scenario, Tony Romo, maybe, but we'll see how it goes there. Maybe they draft another one, in the draft. But I do like this hire with Vance Joseph because he seems like a guy who obviously is really talented, knows what he, can do as far as defense goes, but also someone who was adjusting throughout the year as it became evident that you needed to, which is for a head coach, you can't just be super stubborn and like, oh, my way is the best unless you're Belichick. And I like how he's basically able to takes things and kind of, okay, let's tweak with this. So I think that'll be really good in Denver.
Yes, and I do think it is a great hire as well. But we are going to talk about the quarterback draft class here in the here at the podcast. And Deshaun Watson declared for the NFL draft after the national championship game on Monday. So with Deshaun Watson declaring for the draft, Notre Dame quarterback Deshaun Kaiser declaring for the draft, and then you got Mr. Trubisky declaring for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
All three of those guys are probably going to be in the first round because there's so many quarterback needy teams within the first 5 picks, maybe in the first 10. But to me, I do think Deshaun Watson is the top quarterback in this year's draft class. I think Mitch Trubisky is the second best, and it's not even close. So what are your thoughts on this year's quarterback draft class and the basically, yeah. What's your thoughts, Anthony?
So basically, we saw the Deshaun Watson thing. He's basically somebody who can do a little bit of everything, right? Like we saw, because the thing is with him this year, we saw really good plays and we saw bad plays, right? It was one of those things where he's not polished by any stretch, but you could still see that, like, when they needed him to do something, he was really good at actually trying to figure out something and just doing whatever he could to get the game, for Clemson, which he did the national championship game. Also, the one thing now is call it, late February, early March, we tend to start overinflating the quarterbacks. That's kind of what happened with Jared Goff, right? We kind of are like, oh, he could be good. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but it hasn't exactly looked good so far for him. And you always want a quarterback, right? So you're going to kind of overspend, overpay, overdraft, over whatever for a quarterback just because, we saw with Denver, right? We saw that basically they were one pick away, like they were basically a quarterback away. And if they would have had him, it would have been a lot better season for them. They could have made it to the playoffs because all we talk about Peyton Manning, he led them to the playoffs and a Super Bowl. So with the quarterback and the first overall pick, we generally like to go with a quarterback in there. But it's the same thing as what we did, and I think it was 2011. Basically, that 2011 draft, had Cam Newton at the top, which, fantastic, great, he's a fantastic quarterback. Only other people in the top 10 that didn't pan out were quarterbacks, right? Because you had Von Miller, Marcel Darius, A.J. Green, Patrick Peterson, Julio Jones, Aldon Smith, Tyron Smith, and J.J. Watt. Like, all those dudes are like Pro Bowl, all-pro talent. Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert, not so much, because we like to reach for quarterbacks. So I do think these two quarterbacks are going to go up there, and you can say the same thing with Deshaun Kaiser and stuff like that. I do like Mitch Trubisky a little bit more than Kaiser, but I do think Watson is probably, of all of them, I think he's probably the best in the draft. Whether he goes first or second, I don't know, but I could absolutely see those being the two guys to basically get taken 1 and 2. Maybe not by the Browns and Niners, but just taken because you want a quarterback and you got to take a guy.
Yeah, I can actually see the Browns drafting a quarterback. And if the Browns decide to go with Myles Garrett, who I think is the best overall player in this year's draft, to me, he's a can't-miss talent. But let's just say the Browns happen to not go in that direction. I think they are going to get a quarterback, and I think they're going to go with Deshaun Watson. And if Cleveland happens to go with Myles Garrett at number 1, I do think there's a strong chance, depending on who the head coach is for the 49ers,
right,
I do think there's a chance they can take him there. But that just depends on who the GM and who the coach is, because remember, they still don't have those jobs filled.
Right.
But my favorite quarterback in this year's draft, and he's not talked about at all, is Cooper Rush of Central Michigan.
Okay.
I think he is my favorite quarterback. He's probably going to go in the later rounds, basically because of the team that he's played with, the school that he was at. But
it didn't work out for Carson Wentz. It took Carson Wentz pretty high, and he came out of a small school.
Yeah, I know, but he's not. He hasn't been talked about highly.
Right.
Central Michigan, they were 6-6, but the things that he showed, this year, he's been really consistent throughout his whole career. at Central Michigan. He's been a 4-year starter. He has improved every year, and I do think if he's in the right situation, I do think he can be one of the best quarterbacks in this year's draft class. But he's not the best quarterback in this draft class. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he is my favorite quarterback to watch, until draft time. But The best quarterback, though, is Deshaun Watson. I'll have to go with Mitch Trubisky at 2nd, Deshaun Kaiser at 4. I'll have to go Brian Kaya in Miami. And then after that, I'll have to go Patrick Mahomes from Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, those are my top 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft. But Cooper Rush is probably my favorite one to watch.
I probably knock Kaya a little bit down a little bit because like I said, again, being a Miami Hurricanes fan, like I've seen Brad Kaya and he's been okay, but he hasn't ever had anything that's been like super fantastic, amazing. So I just kind of wonder if he's going to be that in the pros.
Yeah, and I think he's been rated high because of his potential, and that's.
He does. He has a lot of potential, so there is that in there. But no, I like it's going to be interesting to see with Watson, see what they actually do with the quarterbacks, because the quarterback's going to be taken in the top 5 of the draft. That's just how that's going to happen because the importance of the position. But with that said, like I think if I had to bet, I'd probably say Watson gets taken high just because we just saw how good he was. It kind of happened like that with Vince Young, like we saw, like, wow, okay, this is a great game. Now he didn't do as well in the pros, but he didn't, he wasn't an absolute train wreck along the lines of like Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, I do think Deshaun Watson is a lot better than Johnny Manziel.
I love Johnny. I love Johnny so much in college.
I know. I did too. I think everyone did, but I think a name to not forget in the quarterback draft class. He is coming off an ACL injury. Would be Chad Kelly. So I do think he is someone to watch out for. His draft stock is going to drop because of the ACL injury, but I loved what Chad Kelly did at Ole Miss before the injury happened.
Right.
But we're going to take our last break here, and we're going to discuss the AP Top 25 rankings, the final ones to come out of the college football season. And we will talk about that when we come back at the Going to Meet Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Well, the AP Top 25 rankings, the final ones, that is, were released, I believe, on Tuesday after the National Championship game was finished. So, in the top 5, we got Clemson at 1, Alabama at 2, USC at 3, Washington at 4, and Oklahoma to round up the top 5. I do agree that USC belongs in the top 5, top 4 to end the year. I think they were the 3rd best team in the last 8 games, and it really showed that they had a really great win against Penn State in the Rose Bowl, which was another classic that happened this college football season. And from 6 to 10, we got Ohio State, we got Penn State, Florida State, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So we know Michigan and Penn State kind of fall off. They kind of drop off a little bit. But I do expect both of these teams to come back in the Big Ten next year. And Oklahoma State, Stanford, LSU, Florida, and Western Michigan round out 11 through 15. Virginia Tech, Colorado, West Virginia, South Florida, and Miami round out 16 to 20. And Louisville, Tennessee, Utah, Auburn, and San Diego State round up 21 to 25. So, yes. What do you think about these rankings, Anthony?
I mean, it's basically the thing where, they're showing us who's going to be who's going to be ranked high next year in the preseason polls, right? Because we saw Sam Darnold do in USC, and obviously the AP and basically the media in general loves those kind of bigger name schools, right? Because if you look at the top 10, Alabama, USC, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State, Florida State, Michigan, all those are like super like old school power teams, right? And even Clemson's been pretty good for the last few years. And then you get something else like a Wisconsin or something like that. Like you have these teams who are big names, right? Like Washington's the only one that's kind of like a smaller type of school. But, you know, we basically know that they're going to love Sam Darnold next year. They're going to be ranked high. Ohio State is going to be ranked high because they're basically, you know, going to reload kind of like an Alabama style where they're just going to get new players who are good. Same with Michigan, same with Alabama, same with, you know, teams like Oklahoma who may start off slow but do well because Oklahoma always is ranked high, and they lose a game or two to start, then they drop, and then they slowly bring their way back. You know, I talked about this with Ben in the sports podcast where it's basically they still have Ohio State over Penn State, even though you could make a case that maybe Ohio State should have been lower because they didn't win their, you know, conference. And then also when they actually played in a bowl game, Penn State barely lost to USC, to where Ohio State got the break speed off of them by Clemson. But then we just saw Clemson beat Alabama. So clearly Clemson's a really good team. Penn State losing to USC. Yeah, they only lost by 3, but they gave up over 100 total points.
Not only that, they gave up 52 points.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, it's one of those things where, I mean, these things are just fodder for people to talk about, right? Like, that's the only reason why these polls are actually out is just for us to talk about them and say how good or bad they are. And then when they do the preseason polls next year, we talk about how good or bad they are. And then we basically forget about it a couple weeks into the season because all of a sudden whatever was in the top 10 doesn't look anything close by about week 4.
Yeah, exactly. But by looking at these rankings, I am so excited to see the Pac-12 next year. You know, you got USC, Washington. I think they're going to be ranked in the top 5, top 10. And then don't forget, you know, you got Stanford, and they ended the year really strong.
Right.
And then you got Colorado, who were in the Pac-12 championship. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. Then you got Utah. Then I think UCLA is going to bounce back next year. So, I don't know. I think the Pac-12 is back. I'm really excited to see the Pac-12 next year. And I think USC is going to be talked about as a playoff favorite. I do think Penn State is going to be talked about as a playoff favorite as well. But, yeah, you know, I can't believe the college football season is already over. And I can't wait for next season already. I just think we're in for a very exciting year in 2017.
I do really want to see how Sam Darnold does because he kind of popped out of nowhere, and he looked really good in the Rose Bowl, so I want to see how he does, because if he can be anything close to a good quarterback at USC, we're all going to be back on USC. Like, exactly. Everyone's going to be back, like, oh, USC's back. They're going to start playing old, like, Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush tapes. They're going to show Will Ferrell on the sideline, Snoop Dogg on the side. They're going to show all these things, saying USC's back, and then you're going to have actual celebrities now going back to USC games because, you know, the one that we figured out about L.A., you know.
They like winners.
They like winners. They like people who are going to make things at the very least entertaining, right? And if USC's good, they're going to go to the games, because we saw with the NFL, with the Rams, they stink. No one went.
A couple of celebrities that go to Rams games, but that didn't last that long. But, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying here with USC. You know, when they're good, it's like they're like the top team there in Southern California besides, you know, the NBA teams and the Dodgers. But they're always one of those top teams. I think, honestly, because of the market that they're in. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're going to be, you know, highly talked about. And, you know, Sam Darnold, he is a freshman quarterback. I do think he is going to be really good next year. And, you know, he did come out of nowhere, but you got to remember, he was one of the hottest quarterbacks during the year, you know, when USC won the 8-game winning streak.
Right.
So, you know, he wasn't talked about before, but I think the fact that he was on a national spotlight at the Rose Bowl, and then it was such a high-scoring game, I think that's the reason why a lot more people know about him now. But, you know, don't forget, Sam Darnold was one of the highest quarterbacks in the year, as well as Trace McSorley at Penn State. And that's why, you know, that game was so high-scoring. And Penn State, I'm actually really excited to see them next year, to see how they can bounce back from this. I really am excited to see Florida State, how they can bounce back. I'm really excited to see Michigan. I think Michigan is one of my playoff teams next year, but we will talk about that when the time comes. But you got a story you want to share with us, Anthony.
I do.
You just really, you couldn't wait to share this. Tell me your story.
All right, so here's the thing. Jerry Jones, at this point of his career, he's 74 years old. He's basically a grandpa that just likes to be, you know, in the conversation, right? He likes to tell stories. They don't always have to make sense. He just likes to tell stories. Earlier on in the year, he talked about circumcising a mosquito. That made no sense. now he basically talked about how Prescott and Elliott, their college careers make them equivalent of veteran players. That's not how college works, Jerry. That's not what that is. Like, that's just because you were good in college doesn't mean you have playoff experience and you know what to do, because as good as Elliott was for Ohio State, and he was really good, and I'll give it to him that at least being in college, especially with Elliott being in like the national championship game and being a high-profile running back, the pressure may not get to him. I get that part. That's fine. I'm not saying that part's wrong. But there was nobody when Ohio State was playing. I don't even care if you're playing Alabama that looked like Clay Matthews. That dude is a giant Greek god. And I understand we talked about Bo Scarborough. He's a giant man. Looked like he was, 5 years into the league when he was in 10th grade. That's fine. Also, no one that Ohio State was playing, not Michigan, not Wisconsin, not Alabama, none of them had some of the caliber players that the Packers have, right? Like I said, you go over and look, Clay Matthews, no, that didn't exist. No one was over there trying to tackle you that looked like Julius Peppers, just a giant dude. No one looked like Peppers, no one looked like Matthews, no one looked like anybody on those teams. And he might not be nervous, but Jerry, why are you doing this? Why are you saying these things over and over again? That's basically just putting pressure on Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott, because we're going to be dumb as a media. And after the game, if they had bad games, it's like, well, he said you guys had, experience because you were in college. And then Jerry Jones off in the corner, like, trying to get more sound bites, like, come with me, I'll talk more. Come on, let's go. I don't know what that voice was.
That wasn't Jerry Jones.
I'm trying to do that voice from South Park. It's fine.
I know.
But, I love Jerry Jones because he doesn't care anymore. Like, he's just going to say what's on his mind, because at this point, who's going to stop him? Like, he's just basically going to talk about whatever pops into his head. And his media, we're all ready to grab. We're like, oh, you have more quotes? Okay, cool. Wait, what was that? What? All right, that's fine. Whatever. We're going to take that. We're going to run with it. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it, Jerry. No, you were great. No, fantastic. You have anything else? No? Okay, we'll use that. It's fine.
Yeah. When I hear this, when you're telling me about this story with Jerry Jones, he is putting a lot of pressure on rookies. And don't get me wrong, Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott have been phenomenal this year. Dak Prescott's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. Ezekiel Elliott was a breath of fresh air at the running back position. But these are two guys that have not played any playoff experience, and they're about to play probably the hottest team in the NFL. The hottest offense, the hottest quarterback.
Yep.
The hottest, all around the hottest team. So I can see why you're trying to, encourage them, but you're also putting a lot of pressure when they're about to play in the first playoff game. But we will talk about that game on Friday's show when we will preview the division round. I actually do have a story to tell you, Anthony, before we leave. I was on Twitter during the national championship game on Monday night, and I saw this on Tuesday morning on social media. There was a fan watching the national championship game. He was an Alabama fan.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I saw it on Bleacher Report. I forgot what website or publication tweeted this, but there was a fan. He was obviously a Crimson Tide fan.
Yes.
I don't know where his location was, but when Deshaun Watson threw that game-winning touchdown pass to Hunter Renfrow with 1 second left, the fan punched his TV, and he basically destroyed it. So I just got to say, Anthony, I'm just going to say this. When you watch your team lose like that, it is really not that deep, guys.
Oh, my God.
It's not that deep.
My favorite thing is watching, after someone scores a touchdown to, win the game, or it looks like they're going to win the game, because they did that both for Clemson and Alabama, where it looked like, the team was going to win, and you just, they pan to the crowd, and just the fans are just like, oh, my God. They just look so disheveled. It's just like, oh, my God, everything sucks about my life. It's one of the funniest things for me, which is kind of mean and sociopathic in some ways, but, it's funny just to see them just oh, no.
I honestly, though, I just think it's kind of hilarious to the fact that you're upset about a game about athletes that are about maybe, I don't know, they're late teens, early 20s. They don't even get paid.
Right. And
you're mad that they lost. I just think it's silly, and I just think it's not that deep, guys. It's really not that deep. I just don't get it. But anyway, I just want to talk about this story before we go. I just wanted to watch out for people out there. But, yeah, good show today, Anthony. And we will be back tomorrow. We will discuss news that have occurred the past 24 hours. And I do maybe some head coaching vacancies that will be filled. We might actually discuss Vance Joseph a little bit. Maybe that deal will become official.
Right.
I have heard from that Sean McDermott might be the next Bills coach, so we will talk about that. So we might talk about some head coaching vacancies as well. But, yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
Hey, and I'm Anthony.
And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, and have a good day and have a pleasant tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.